"You're not part of this family," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the clinking of silverware. For a second, I thought maybe I misheard. Maybe she was talking about someone else. But then her eyes locked on me, steady, cold, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. I nodded. Just once. Not fast, not slow. I lowered my gaze to the glass of water in front of me. My hand looked steady, but my knuckles had gone white around the rim. I set it down carefully on the table. No sound. Not even a clink. I smiled. Small, polite, the kind of smile you give a stranger in the grocery store aisle. I did not argue. I did not plead. I did not ask why. But my phone vibrated against my thigh. A soft buzz, but it might as well have been a gunshot under the table. I slid my hand down, glanced at the screen. An alert. Bank notification. New documents filed under my name. My stomach dropped, but my face stayed still. She was still talking, still laughing with the others, like the sentence she had thrown at me was nothing more than casual small talk. The rest of the table picked up where she left off. Jokes, toasts, gossip. My husband stared into his plate. He did not look at me. I pressed the lock button on my phone, then leaned back in my chair. My smile didn't move. Inside, though, something shifted. Something sharp and final. I had been erased before, not invited to Christmas photos, my name forgotten on wedding programs, my chair conveniently missing at Thanksgiving dinner. But this time, there was paperwork. There was proof. And there was a line I would not let her cross. That night, after I got home, I opened my laptop. My hands were steady now. I uploaded everything. Screenshots, alerts, emails. I wrote a statement, just the facts. Then I hit send. The next morning, she heard a knock on her door. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind. The invitation had come 3 days earlier. A message from her, short and clipped. Dinner Saturday. Don't be late. Family only. Family only. I read it twice. My first instinct was to ignore it, to save myself the humiliation. But then I thought of my son. He deserved to have me there, to see me there, to know that his mother belonged. The whole day of the dinner, my body carried a weight I couldn't explain. The sky was gray, the kind of color that presses down on your chest. I wore the red scarf my son had given me for Christmas. He had saved his allowance for weeks to buy it. "So you won't feel left out," he had whispered when he handed it to me. I wrapped it twice around my neck before leaving the house, like armor. When I walked into the dining room that night, the smell of roasted chicken and garlic butter filled the air. The chandelier glowed golden over the long table. Plates gleamed. Wine glasses sparkled. Everyone was already seated. My mother-in-law at the head, of course. My husband 2 seats down. My sister-in-law laughing too loudly at something trivial. I pulled out my chair. That's when it happened. Her voice cut through. "You're not part of this family." The words hung there, suspended in the warm light. No one spoke. No one defended me, not even him. I nodded. And as I nodded, memories swarmed. The first year of my marriage, she had asked me to cook for Thanksgiving. I stayed up all night, peeling, chopping, roasting. When the turkey came out perfectly golden, she smiled, patted my hand, and announced to the room, "At least she knows how to follow instructions." The next year, I wasn't even told about the gathering. My husband came home with leftovers wrapped in foil, avoiding my eyes. Then there was the Christmas when she handed out gifts to everyone. Watches, perfume, expensive handbags. When it came to me, she placed a single scented candle in front of me and said, "This is enough for someone like you." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, quietly. Every slight, every exclusion, every cut had built this wall inside me. And tonight, with one sentence, she slammed the last brick in place. I thought of the money I had lent them, the medical bills I had covered, the weekends I had given up so she could rest. I thought of all the times I swallowed my pride for the sake of peace, and then my phone buzzed. That alert, that one line of text that told me she had gone further than words this time. I glanced at the screen. Documents in my name, but not signed by me. My credit tied to things I had never touched. My smile widened, just slightly. I did not confront her. Not in that room. Not in front of all those eyes that had already decided I did not belong. Instead, I sipped my water. I placed my fork neatly beside my plate. I waited until dessert. Then I excused myself. Back home, I pulled the red scarf off my neck, laid it gently on the counter. I sat down, opened my laptop, and began typing. The bitterness in my chest melted into something calmer, sharper. Justice, maybe, or survival. I attached every file, every screenshot. I wrote every detail with precision. No embellishment, no anger. Just truth, carved into sentences. When I hit send, I leaned back in my chair. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the moment before a storm breaks. And the next day, when the storm arrived, it wasn't at my door, it was at hers. 3 days before the dinner, the message came. Short, cold. Dinner Saturday. Don't be late. Family only. I stared at the screen for a long time. Family only. The words pulsed like they were mocking me. My first instinct was to ignore it. Pretend I never saw it. But then I thought of my son. He deserved to see me at that table. To know that his mother had a seat, even if it was begrudgingly given. Still, something about those 2 words gnawed at me. Family only. I reread them over and over, trying to figure out what exactly she meant. It felt less like an invitation and more like a warning. All week, my chest carried a weight I couldn't explain. At work, I kept dropping things. My hands trembled when I held a pen. At night, I tossed and turned, replaying past dinners in my head. Every scene ended the same. Me on the outside, her in control. On Saturday, I dressed carefully. Not fancy, not plain. A navy dress that fit just right. Nothing she could call cheap or flashy. I wrapped the red scarf my son had given me around my neck, looping it twice until it felt like armor. He had saved weeks of allowance for it. So you won't feel left out, he whispered the day he gave it to me. I kissed his forehead and promised him I'd wear it. The air outside was heavy, clouds pressing low like a lid on the sky, the kind of gray that makes the world look smaller, like it's closing in. I walked to the car slowly, clutching my purse tighter than usual. My reflection in the window showed calm, but my stomach twisted like a knot pulled too tight. On the drive over, the radio played some upbeat pop song. I turned it off. The silence was easier. Every streetlight I stopped at, I caught myself gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached. I loosened them, shook them out, but a minute later, they'd be back in that death grip. I tried to convince myself it would be fine, that maybe this time would be different. Maybe she was finally ready to accept me. Maybe all the past humiliations would fade into the background, and tonight could be about family, about peace. But then I remembered. The Christmas, she handed out gifts to everyone. Gold watches, leather bags, perfume bottles. When it came to me, she set a candle on the table. "This is enough for someone like you," she said. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, quietly, but my chest burned for hours. Or, the Thanksgiving she asked me to cook. I stayed up all night preparing everything. When the turkey came out golden and perfect, she patted my hand and said, "At least you can follow instructions." No thank you, no acknowledgement of effort. Just that. And then there was the wedding. My own wedding. She had insisted on choosing the florist. I said fine. She chose white roses. At the reception, she whispered to her sister, loud enough for me to hear, "At least the flowers are beautiful, even if the bride isn't." These memories rose up like ghosts in the car with me. I gripped the wheel tighter. I told myself to breathe. By the time I pulled into their driveway, the sun was dipping low, painting everything in muted gold. Their house looked warm from the outside, windows glowing, laughter faint through the glass. For a second, I almost believed I belonged. But then I saw it. Their cars lined up neatly, bags by the door, like they were planning something bigger than just dinner. I couldn't shake the thought that this wasn't just a meal. It was something else. I rang the bell. My husband opened the door. His smile was small, tight. "You're here," he said, like it was a surprise. His eyes darted past me, into the driveway, as if making sure no one else had followed. Inside, the smell of roasted chicken and garlic butter filled the air. The chandelier glowed golden over the long table. Plates gleamed, wine glasses sparkled, voices blended together in laughter. Everyone was already seated. Everyone except me. I walked slowly toward the table, scarf snug against my neck, trying to steady my breath. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I could just blend in, sit down, eat, leave quietly. But the feeling in my gut twisted again, a low hum, an ache that told me this was not going to end well. I pulled out my chair. And that's when she said it. "You're not part of this family." The words hit harder than I expected, even though I had rehearsed them in my mind 100 times. Even though I thought I was ready. I nodded. Just once. My hand set the glass of water down carefully. My smile stayed in place. But inside, something cracked. Something that had been holding for years, finally giving way, and I had no idea then how far it would go. People often ask when a relationship really begins to crack. They expect one big moment, one final betrayal. But with her, it was never just one thing. It was a slow drip, a steady erosion that hollowed me out long before she ever said the words, "You're not part of this family." It started the very first time I met her. My husband and I had been dating for less than a year. He brought me to a Sunday lunch. I had picked out a dress I thought was safe, navy blue with long sleeves. When she opened the door, her eyes swept over me once, head to toe. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Later, while we were clearing plates, I heard her whisper to his aunt, "At least he's getting this out of his system before he settles down for real." That sentence clung to me like a stain. Even when he proposed a year later, even when we walked down the aisle, it followed me. She never believed I was permanent. To her, I was always temporary. On our wedding day, I thought maybe she would soften. She insisted on handling the flowers. I didn't argue. When I walked into the reception, white roses filled the hall, cascading from every corner. Guests gasped at how beautiful it was. I almost cried from relief. Then I overheard her telling a cousin, "At least the flowers are pretty, even if the bride isn't." I smiled for the photographs anyway. My husband never asked why my eyes looked so hollow in every picture. After the wedding, it became clearer. Every family dinner, she found a way to remind me I wasn't one of them. If I cooked, she called it following instructions. If I didn't, she complained I wasn't pulling my weight. If I dressed up, she said I was showing off. If I wore something plain, she sighed about how her son had married beneath his station. It wasn't just words. It was the way she rearranged seating so I was at the far end of the table, sometimes next to the kids. It was the way she handed me the bill at restaurants, smiling sweetly while calling it, "just this once." It was the way she never used my name, only her or that one. I tried. God, I tried. I brought her flowers on Mother's Day. She left them on the porch until they wilted. I baked her favorite pie for Thanksgiving. She said it was too sweet and scraped it into the trash. I covered medical bills once when she ended up in the emergency room. She thanked her son, not me. The one that hurt the most came after my son was born. He was barely a week old. I was exhausted, raw, clinging to sanity. She came over, looked into his crib, and said, "Well, at least he has my eyes. Maybe he'll still feel like part of this family." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled, thanked her for visiting, and cried into a pillow after she left. The years blurred together after that. Each holiday, each celebration carried its own sting. One Christmas, she handed out expensive gifts to everyone, then gave me a single candle. "This is enough for someone like you," she said, her tone dripping with sugar. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, quietly. My husband squeezed my hand under the table but said nothing. Another time, she convinced my husband to let her store some documents under my name. "Just temporary," she said. I didn't know until later that it was a loan she had no intention of paying. I found out when collectors started calling. I paid it off because I was too ashamed to admit what she had done. Through it all, I told myself to be patient. That if I showed enough kindness, if I proved myself, maybe she would come around. I clung to her rare moments of civility like they meant something. Once, when I helped her set the table, she said, "Not bad." I carried that scrap of approval for months, but there were cracks even in those moments. She always knew how to twist kindness into a weapon. "If you just stay quiet," she told me once, "everything will be easier." I took it as advice. Later I realized it was an order. Silence was her favorite trick. If I didn't argue, She could pretend I agreed. If I stayed polite, she could paint me as weak. Looking back, I see the pattern. Every insult was a test, every humiliation a rehearsal. She was building towards something, conditioning me to accept exclusion as normal. So when she finally said it, "You're not part of this family," it didn't come as a shock. Not really. It was the logical conclusion of every small cut, every quiet erasure. But here's what she never expected. I had been keeping records. Not at first. At first, it was just receipts stuffed into a drawer. But over time, I started saving messages, screenshots of her demands, notes about what she said, copies of bills I covered, contracts she forged, a paper trail of every way she had used me. She thought I was the quiet one, the weak one, the one who would nod and smile forever. And I almost did. Until that night at dinner. Until my phone buzzed with that alert. Until I saw, in real time, the proof that she had crossed the line again. That was the moment all the pieces clicked into place. The whispers, the debts, the erasures, the smirks. Every moment, she chipped away at me, built toward this. She thought she was untouchable. She thought wrong. The dining room glowed, as if it were staged for a photograph. Golden light poured from the chandelier, scattering across polished glassware and silver utensils. The smell of roasted chicken mingled with garlic butter and a hint of cinnamon from the apple pie cooling on the counter. It should have been warm, welcoming. Instead, it felt like a trap disguised as a celebration. I stood at the edge of the room for a moment, scarf snug against my neck, eyes scanning the table. Every seat was full, except mine. My sister-in-law leaned close to her husband, laughing at something too trivial to be funny. My father-in-law poured himself another glass of red wine, humming along to music playing faintly in the background. My husband sat 2 seats from his mother, shoulders hunched, eyes on his plate as if reading words only he could see. And at the head, of course, was she, my mother-in-law. Her posture was perfect, her chin slightly raised. She held her glass like royalty, 2 fingers resting delicately against the stem. When she noticed me, her smile flickered for just a second before snapping back into place, practiced and sharp. I pulled out the chair reserved for me. The scrape of wood against the floor echoed louder than it should have. I sat down slowly, arranging my napkin on my lap, willing my hands not to shake. My heart pounded, every beat pressing against my ribs. For a few minutes, conversation floated around the table. Mundane chatter. My sister-in-law bragging about her latest shopping trip. My father-in-law recounting a story he had told a dozen times before. My husband silent, occasionally nodding when spoken to. I chewed slowly, though the food tasted like cardboard in my mouth. Then, without warning, the room shifted. She set her glass down gently, the sound crisp in the sudden lull. Her eyes swept over the table before locking on me. "You're not part of this family." The words were soft, almost casual, but they carried the weight of years. My fork paused midair. My chest tightened. Around me, the others froze for a heartbeat, then resumed their eating as if nothing had happened. My husband lowered his gaze even further, staring at his plate like it might swallow him whole. I swallowed. Slowly. I set my fork down, aligning it neatly beside my plate. My hand brushed against the cool surface of the water glass. I lifted it, took a sip, then returned it to the exact same spot. Not a tremor, not a sound. I nodded. Just once. Her lips curled, satisfied. She turned back to the others, picking up the thread of conversation as though she had merely commented on the weather. But inside me, something snapped. The chandelier's glow felt harsher now, exposing every flaw, every line etched by her contempt. The laughter that resumed around me sounded sharp, like knives clinking together. The roasted chicken smelled too rich, too heavy, turning my stomach. My body betrayed me in small ways. A bead of sweat traced down my spine. My hands felt cold, though the room was warm. My throat ached from holding back words that wanted to burst free. I looked at my husband. For just a second, his eyes flicked up to meet mine. There was guilt there, unmistakable, and fear. Then he looked away again, shoving food around his plate without eating. That tiny glance told me everything. He would not stand up for me. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I scanned the faces around the table. My sister-in-law smirked into her wine glass. My father-in-law chewed methodically, pretending to be lost in thought. The cousins whispered to each other, their eyes darting toward me and then away. It was as if they had all silently agreed. I was an outsider, and this was the moment to cement it. My pulse quickened, but my expression remained calm. A smile tugged at the corners of my lips. It wasn't joy. It was something colder, sharper. The room moved on, pretending the sentence had dissolved into the air. But for me, it lingered, carved into the space between my ribs. I tasted metal at the back of my throat. I excused myself before dessert. My voice was steady, polite. I even thanked her for dinner. She smiled, triumphant, her eyes glinting with victory. She thought she had won. As I stood to leave, I felt every eye on me. Not with sympathy, not with concern, but with a kind of curious detachment, as if they were watching an actress step off stage. I walked out calmly, scarf still wrapped tight. My footsteps echoed in the hallway, a steady rhythm against the silence. At the door, I paused. I glanced back once. She was laughing again, head tilted back, teeth flashing. The picture of power. She didn't know the power had already shifted. Because while she was savoring her victory, my phone buzzed again in my purse. Another alert. Another piece of proof sliding neatly into my hands. I pressed my fingers against the fabric, feeling the vibration fade. My face betrayed nothing. But inside, I was already planning. By the time I stepped into the cold night air, the path was clear. The words, "You're not part of this family," were no longer an insult. They were evidence, and I intended to use them. The rest of the dinner unfolded, like a play I had seen too many times before. Everyone knew their roles. My mother-in-law played the queen, orchestrating laughter and conversation. My sister-in-law filled the room with her shrill voice, always a little too loud, always trying too hard. My father-in-law stayed quiet, pouring wine, pretending not to notice anything beneath the surface. And me? I was the extra, the placeholder, the one they could erase with a sentence. But this time, I wasn't erasing myself. I sat still, my hands folded neatly in my lap, my smile fixed in place. On the outside, I looked composed. Inside, every nerve in my body buzzed like a live wire. The chandelier above seemed to burn hotter, pressing down on me. The scent of garlic and roasted chicken clung to the air, suffocating in its richness. Every laugh at that table scraped against my skin. My husband's silence was the sharpest cut. He didn't defend me. He didn't even meet my eyes. He stared at his plate, pushing food around as if rearranging it could rearrange reality. I wanted him to look at me, just once, to acknowledge the humiliation hanging over me like smoke. But he didn't. Across the table, my sister-in-law smirked. She sipped her wine slowly, savoring it like she was savoring my discomfort. My mother-in-law caught the glance and returned it, an unspoken agreement flickering between them. They had staged this. They had wanted this moment. I took another sip of water, my throat tight, my pulse hammering. My hand trembled for a fraction of a second before I steadied it. No one noticed. Or maybe they did, and they enjoyed it. The conversations grew louder, livelier. They toasted to health, to family, to everything I had just been excluded from. Each word landed like a stone. Family. Belonging. Together. Words that used to mean comfort now sounded like accusations. I tried to eat, but every bite turned to dust in my mouth. I chewed, swallowed, forced myself to keep pace with the room. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me falter. Still, my body betrayed me in whispers. My jaw ached from clenching too hard. My shoulders burned from holding myself so straight. My palms were damp, hidden under the table. My heart raced with every laugh that excluded me. Inside, though, the anger took on a strange shape. Not fiery, not explosive, cold, precise, like a blade being sharpened in silence. I thought about my son, about the scarf he had given me, about his hopeful little voice, "So you won't feel left out." He had believed in me. He had believed I belonged. And here I was, sitting in a room that told him otherwise. If I accepted this treatment, what would that teach him? That silence is safety? That humiliation is normal? Number. I watched my mother-in-law laugh, her head tilting back, her pearls catching the light. She believed she had won. She believed I had taken her words and swallowed them whole. She believed the nod I gave her was surrender. But it wasn't. That nod was a promise. To myself, to my son, to every version of me who had been erased, humiliated, dismissed. The air in the room felt heavier as the night dragged on. My ears rang with the sound of silverware clinking, glasses chiming, voices overlapping. My eyes drifted to the window, where the night pressed against the glass. It was quiet out there. Honest. Unlike the theater playing out around me, I remembered every past slight in vivid detail. The candle she gave me one Christmas while others unwrapped gold watches. The time she asked me to cook Thanksgiving dinner and then dismissed it as just following instructions. The medical bills I had paid in her name that she pretended my husband had covered. Each memory rose like a tide, lifting me higher, carrying me towards something inevitable. I realized then that this was not humiliation. Not really. This was clarity. I had spent years hoping she would change, that patience would earn me a place at the table. But tonight proved it once and for all. She would never see me as family, no matter what I did. And that meant I was free. Free to stop begging. Free to stop shrinking. Free to take the pieces of evidence she had so carelessly scattered and turn them into a weapon she would never see coming. I smiled. A real smile this time. Small, sharp, private. She noticed. Her brows arched, just slightly, as if confused. She didn't ask. She returned to her laughter, convinced she had broken me. Let her think that. The more she believed I was finished, the stronger I became. Dessert came and went. Coffee was poured. Jokes were told. And through it all, I stayed still, calm, unshaken. I didn't rise to the bait. I didn't argue. I didn't give her the spectacle she craved. But inside, I was already writing the next chapter. Every laugh, every glance, every word of exclusion fed the fire inside me. It wasn't rage anymore. It was strategy. And by the time I excused myself and stepped out into the cold night, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. That night, when I finally left their house, the air outside felt different, crisp, clean. The kind of air that makes you breathe deeper, like your lungs have been waiting for it. The stars above shimmered faintly, half hidden by clouds, but enough to remind me there was a bigger world beyond those suffocating walls. I walked to my car slowly. Each step echoed against the driveway. Behind me, I could still hear laughter spilling through the windows. They were celebrating. They thought they had erased me with one sentence. I sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, staring at the porch light flickering against the night. My phone buzzed again. Another alert. More proof. My pulse steadied, not quickened. For the first time in years, I felt calm. At home, the house was quiet. My son was already asleep. I kissed his forehead, pulled the blanket higher on his shoulders, and lingered for a moment. He stirred, murmuring softly, and I whispered, "You belong with me. Always." Then I went to my desk. The red scarf slipped from my shoulders and fell onto the chair. I opened my laptop and laid everything out. Screenshots, messages, records, copies of contracts with my name signed in handwriting that wasn't mine. All the little ways she had used me, documented and undeniable. I typed carefully, every word deliberate. I attached evidence, built a timeline, cross-referenced dates. By the time I hit send, dawn was creeping across the sky. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and listened to the silence. It was the kind of silence that hums with possibility. The next morning, the knock came. Firm, sharp. 3 raps against the wooden door of her house. She opened it, still in her robe, hair pinned sloppily, her face unprepared for visitors. 2 officers stood there, calm, professional. One held a folder thick with papers. Her smile faltered. She asked what this was about. They told her. Forgery, fraud, misuse of identity. The color drained from her face. Her hand gripped the doorknob so tightly her knuckles whitened. She sputtered, tried to laugh it off. There must be a mistake. My daughter-in-law is confused. But the officers didn't smile. They handed her the papers. They listed the charges. They explained the process. Neighbors peeked through curtains. A dog barked down the street. The world kept spinning, but her world tilted. Inside, the family gathered, confusion turning to panic. My husband rushed to the door, his tie half knotted. He stammered questions the officers didn't answer. My sister-in-law gasped, her hand covering her mouth in theatrical shock. My father-in-law poured another glass of wine with shaking hands. She tried again. She's lying. She's bitter. She's not even part of this family. Huh. But the officers already had the evidence. My evidence. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. I sat by my own window, sipping tea, the steam curling in front of my face. The morning sun spilled across the table, warm and unbothered. My phone buzzed with updates, messages flying from one relative to another. Some angry, some confused, some silent. I didn't reply. Instead, I watched my son eat his cereal, swinging his legs beneath the chair, humming to himself. He didn't know what was happening yet. He didn't need to. All he needed to know was that his mother stood her ground. Later, I heard she cried. That she shouted about betrayal. That she called me ungrateful, vindictive, cruel. That she begged for understanding. But none of that reached me. All I had were the facts, the truth she thought I would never speak. I imagined her face when the officers handed her the paperwork, the disbelief, the rage, the cracks in her carefully constructed image. She had spent years painting herself as untouchable, but now the paint was peeling, revealing the rot underneath. And the irony? She had given me the final push. By saying those words out loud, by declaring in front of everyone that I was not part of the family, she freed me from playing along. I didn't know how this would end, whether she would face real consequences, or whether her money and connections would soften the blow. But I knew one thing. The balance of power had shifted. She could no longer erase me with a sentence. That night, as I tucked my son into bed, he asked if everything was okay. I smiled, brushed his hair back, and said, "Everything is better than okay." He nodded, satisfied, and drifted to sleep. I sat by the window again, tea in hand, the scarf draped across my shoulders. Outside, the night stretched endless and quiet. I thought about her. Alone in that big house, walls closing in, wondering how it had all slipped through her fingers, and I wondered, not without a touch of irony, if she realized what she had truly lost. Because family isn't about blood. It isn't about power. It isn't about who sits at the head of the table. Family is about who shows up, who protects you, who refuses to let you be erased. She told me I wasn't part of hers. Maybe she was right. But what she didn't see was that, in trying to push me out, she pushed herself out instead. The knock on her door was only the beginning, and I don't know if she has figured it out yet. But I do know this. She will never look at me the same way again.